Yeah. Oh, I love that. Although some of you over here didn't clap. Are you doing okay? I mean, I'm asking that partly for the meeting's sake, but also for our topic. You know, like, how are you feeling? Like, are you going to live a very long time? Are you not? Are you, living the kind of life that might help you live a very long time? And I am really, really pleased to be here with one of the experts on this in the entire world who can help us sort this out. But I do want to thank, Mark for, having that, I don't know, fairly depressing panel just before us with some hope, when we're talking about longevity. So we got to think about, and I just wrote a book that's partly on climate change, and climate change health. We have to think about the world that we want to live longer in. I mean, it's not just about the medical side. So just wanted to sort of underscore that. But just as a little introduction here, I'm David Ewing Duncan, and I'm a journalist and writer, started 2 or 3 companies. I've covered the longevity space for almost 25 years. Broke some of the original stories in the late 90s, when I think it's fair to say that longevity began a very slow progress from being kind of mythological and pie in the sky and not really going to happen in terms of radical increases in lifespan. But we started an era which we're now heavily into, the science of longevity and aging and how it all works and how everything ties together and how we might be increasing, I use the word, I'm sure David does too, health span. It's not lifespan. I mean, we all see what it's like with older, the elderly people in our lives. It's not always very pleasant to just live a long time if you're not, healthy. So we're talking about health span here. But we are at an interesting moment. And I've been giving lots of talks because I just had the book come out, but we're at this inflection point. And I think that's part of what this meeting is about here. And it's literally the theme, the world that we want, as opposed to the one, that we could get if we're not careful. It's a kind of a best of times, worst of times. And this goes for longevity and for healthcare in general. We are in an extraordinary moment of breakthroughs, and Mark mentioned earlier about this intersection of AI and health. I mean, I think there's still a ways to go to make that actually work, but it's clearly going to change things, already is. But we're also in a moment when our healthcare system and the politics of healthcare is at a low point, let's just say. And so my first question is introducing David Karow, who is, you're now the president of
Human Longevity.
Yeah, of Human Longevity, Inc. And I think you all have heard of this, you've been here before, right?
I haven't. Larry invited me for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard about this from Larry. I think I've even talked about it in the past. I actually, 5 years ago, went to HLI and had their full test. In fact, I'm just going to pop up here just a couple slides because this is actually David 5 years ago giving me some really unexpected news. So I went in as a healthy person, HLI, it's in La Jolla. It's this beautiful facility. You feel like you're walking into the future. They test you every which way, genetic, lots of omics, advanced scanning technologies, everything is there. It's not cheap. I don't think it's still cheap, but that's mostly because these technologies are still very expensive. So we had a little bit of a finding here. Yep. And we're going to hear about it in a minute because Larry's going to join us with a much more serious finding. But this is my neck, and that's my carotid artery there where that little green arrow is. And that is where the X is an aneurysm. This is an aneurysm in my carotid artery that maybe you should pick this up, David.
Yeah. So we thrive bringing in presumed healthy individuals into our business, and a lot of the folks come in somewhat arrogantly, saying, "Hey, listen, my husband or wife dragged me in here. You're not going to find anything. I'm here because of him or her." And actually, what we found is that of the presumed healthy individuals who come to see us, and we publish this in PNAS, 40% have clinically significant findings that weren't previously known that are actionable, and 14% have life-altering findings that need to be dealt with, in the next week, and that's 1 in 50 with early-stage high-grade tumors, 1 in 50 with aortic or brain aneurysms like this one, 1 in 6 with rare genetic mutations like BRCA mutations. And the key to all these findings, and it's really a laundry list of 12 different sets of findings, the key to all of this is that, look, if you find these things early, pre-symptomatically, they're actionable, and you can do something about it. And it's really the whole sort of idea behind precision prevention that, look, our healthcare system right now is somewhat broken, as you alluded to, because it's sick care, it's end-stage disease, it's stage 3, it's stage 4. What about identifying something pre-symptomatically, like in your case, or at stage 1 when you can do something about it? So in David's case here, we did find a aneurysm, and I think you followed up with a neurologist. And, vascular surgeon, neurologist. And typically, this is in a location, thankfully, where it doesn't need to be operated on or surgerized. It can just be followed safely over time. And so this is one of those things that we'll just follow safely with the non-contrast MRI. The other thing to highlight from this is that we didn't give you any dye when you went through this injection dye. This is our non-contrast whole body MRI, so we call this a non-contrast MR angiogram. And it's super great for picking up pre-symptomatic aneurysms. And the difference between a pre-symptomatic aneurysm and a ruptured one is literally life and death, because ruptured aneurysms have a very, very high mortality rate. So if you got one, you want to know about it. So I can't look y'all in the room and say you'll never have an aneurysm, but if you do have one, you want to know about it early when it can be treated. So that's the whole concept behind what we do.
Yeah, and by the way, I appreciate that. And just not to, sure nobody's in suspense because I actually am still here, but it turned out it ruptured one of the layers of the artery, but it wasn't, we just watched it.
Yep.
And it ended up just going away. Yep. So it didn't rupture all the way, but it was a little disconcerting to go in healthy and get a finding like this. But
Presumed healthy.
Yes, exactly. Presumed. Oh yeah, well, feeling healthy,
yeah.
Or at least thinking I'm healthy. And by the way, a little later today, Lee Hood is in the room, and a longtime fire participant, and he is going to be talking more about some other things that you work on as well, with different omics and testing, something he calls phenomics, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but I did write the lead story to a special issue of Scientific American that was all about phenomics and what Lee is working on right now. And we go way back, and I've been, by the way, I really hate this, and the guy that's about to join us, Larry Smarr, he's one of the probably only 2 people in the world that have more health data on himself than I have on me. And I did a project called Experimental Man. That was why I was at HLI. And so massive data, and Lee was one of the people who I'm very grateful for, who tested me in various ways, poking, prodding, genetics, lots and lots of different ways to do this. So that kind of brings us, though, to, you and I have had access to this, right? And I was just talking a minute ago about these Tale of Two Cities. There might even be 3 or 4, I don't know. Yeah. It's probably different layers, but speaking about the near future here, yeah. How do we bridge those 2 worlds? How do we bring this great new technology, especially, with some existential threats hanging over us? How do we make sure that this technology gets to everyone?
That's a great question. It's zip code medicine, frankly. Look, I think, our company right now does serve relatively high net worth individuals. We're building sort of the Tesla Roadster of precision medicine, not the Model 3 quite yet. But, I think, look, there's been a lot of companies in this precision medicine space that frankly haven't found a business model and have not survived, right? So I think we have focused first on high net worth individuals. But look, the goal of our company is to democratize and scale. And I think at the end of the day, everyone talks about, value-based care. Well, what is value-based care? Value-based care is about improving outcomes while controlling costs. Kaiser talks a lot about this. The interesting thing about Kaiser is their former CEO, Bernard Tyson, he died at age 61 of a massive preventable heart attack. So Kaiser that talks about value-based care, improving outcomes, their CEO couldn't even make it to 61, right? And the sad fact is, as we talked about, in the US, if you live to the age of 50, you have a 1 in 4 chance of not making it to age 75, just like Bernard Tyson. We all have friends and family that didn't make it to age 75. So what our company is, we're really trying to show the world, first through sort of high net worth individuals, the early adopters, how can precision prevention not only improve outcomes, give you another 10 plus years of high vitality living, but also at scale, as the costs come down, actually control costs. So as the imaging costs come down, I think you're going to show your whole genome sequencing data, as the sequencing costs come down. Yeah. Look, we know that the 3 most important cost centers for our current sick care system today are what? Their inpatient care, their urgent care, and their polypharmacy. So even if you know nothing about our broken system, if you just know those 3 facts, you know why it's broken, because those are all sick care oriented, right? If you're in the ER with urgent care, if you're inpatient care, if you're on multiple medications, you're already sick, right? So the whole concept of what we're trying to do is let's put that money, 20% of GDP right now, by the way, into precision prevention, not stage 3, not stage 4 disease. And look, we have to, because it'll fall like a house of cards. Most economists say that this is going to go from 20% of GDP to 25% of GDP in the next few years. So it's not sustainable. And we think we have some published data on this, that investing pre-symptomatically in precision prevention is the way to do 2 things. 1, improve outcomes, and control costs. So I think that's how eventually we scale this. And honestly, our next few partners are going to be self-insured corporations who know better than anybody else that they're getting kind of screwed with their healthcare costs, and probably small governments that really want to remake their healthcare system, not using sick care as a backbone, but using precision prevention as a backbone.
Yeah, and we've seen this a little bit. I mean, Aetna, some other large companies, IBM, have tried to do versions of this. But yeah. I mean, this is such an interesting moment, because I used to give talks on the tech, there was a lot of dreaming about increasing lifespan and, and fancy technology to get us healthy, but we didn't really have it yet. Yeah. Now we're getting closer and closer, but and that's not the problem. Yeah. And it's really politics. And I just worked on a study where we actually talked about, politics as being a healthcare plus or minus. And like you said, zip code medicine. I mean, we looked up the statistic. In Marin County, the average lifespan is 85. Not too surprising, pretty healthy place, pretty wealthy place. In Fort Worth, Texas, it's 65. And when you go globally, it's even more stark. And so, a lot of that, it's definitely access. It's access to technology and all of that, but part of it also is politics. And we could have a whole session on that, but I wanted to just finish off about this predictive medicine, where you think we'll be in the near future. I mean, how close are we really? Yeah. Even keeping politics in mind, or policy in mind. Yeah. For a long time, like genetic testing, which this is part of my genome anyway. I think it's actually a pretty small part. And by the way, I have no idea what any of that means. But and you get this notebook at HLI, but then they do a great job of explaining it. Where have we turned a corner yet with the actual data? Yeah. To be able to, I remember looking at some data just recently from UK with the biobank. Yeah. There, where they've been collecting genetic samples and following with medical records, and the actual accuracy of these predictions is getting much better. Say you're in your 40s, yeah. And you don't have any family history of heart disease, you don't have any heart disease, they can pretty accurately now predict that you might have a high risk in your 60s. Yeah. But are we there yet?
We're getting there. Look, so I give a lot of talks on kind of longevity, vitality, performance. It's in some ways what embodies our company. And at the end, I usually, if I was doing slides today, I'd end with kind of the 5 longevity hacks. And so the first longevity hack, everyone's always super disappointed, because expecting some kind of silver bullet, magic pill. What is it, doc? But in reality, it is sort of a silver bullet. It is a magic pill. It's the data pill. And so that is the #1 longevity hack, is data, your data, right? And so we're actually, to get to your question, no one really cares in this room probably about, relative risk or population health or population risk. you really want to know what your risk is, right? What's your personalized annualized incidence of all the common chronic age-related diseases? Breast cancer, prostate cancer, coronary artery disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, not relative risk, population level risk, your risk. And actually, you should and can know that data today. Now, in the future, it's going to be super automated so that when a clinician logs into their health intelligence terminal, which we're building, by the way, the first 10 things they're going to see are, that client's or that patient's annualized incidence and their risk for all of these common chronic age-related diseases. Not when they already have it, but 1, 5, 10, 20 years from now, pre-symptomatically, right? And by the way, if that risk is elevated, what are the 1, 2, 3, not generic risk factors, like there's 50 generic risk factors for Alzheimer's, but what are the top 3 that make sense for you? And if you mitigate and pull those levers for those risk factors, how does your risk come down over time? So, we're building some AI models. We use UK Biobank data. We use Alzheimer's disease neuroimaging initiative data, and we published a lot of papers in this area. But the reality is we get more and more big data. We're going to be able to train more powerfully and validate these machine learning algorithms so that you as the patient can know just that. So, right now it's a lot of manual kind of sticking together. We're big believers that there's no single modality that's a silver bullet. So imaging's not the answer, even though I'm kind of a radiologist by training. Genetics is not fully the answer. My Apple Watch is great, but it's not fully the answer. Blood and metabolomic data is not fully, but you put all that together. And we can really answer 2 big, questions that you might have. Doctor, what is my current status for all of these common chronic age-related diseases based on all the data? And then, doctor, what is my 1, 5, 10, 20-year risk for all these? And if it's elevated, what can I do about it? So that's really what we try and provide.
Well, the interesting thing is, too, that what we're, and we'll get to some kind of cool technology here in a second, the more out there stuff. But the reality is that with all, even the technology that you guys have at HLI, it's still, I've been there. You guys still counsel pretty much everybody, even the most high-tech caregivers. It's boring, but it's still exercise, eating well, sleeping, things like that. And one of the cool things is we can measure that now a lot better.
Exactly.
And we can figure out what the outcomes are and if you're particular at risk genetically or some other way. But you live in the same community I do, at least sometimes, the people that want to radically extend lifespan, and they're looking for gene editing and all kinds of things. How do you sort of get them down to earth and get them to focus on, and there's probably not a pill. There are some pills that might work a little bit, but we don't have a pill to increase lifespan. So how do you deliver that message?
Well, listen, I would just say, so we, in our company, we have what we call sort of the 100+ membership, and it has, various different offerings, but 100+ isn't 100+ years of age. And look, I really think, that is a floor, not a ceiling. We're all familiar with the blue zones, that, these are places on planet Earth where people live organically to the age of 100, healthily, right, and vibrantly, and with high vitality, and they don't have fancy whole body MRIs and whole genome sequencing and all of this. So do I think that everyone in this room has the genetic potential to get to 100 healthily? There might be a few exceptions, but I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, that said, there are a lot of scientists in the longevity space who put on their white coats and they say, well, listen, I can get a rat or a mouse or Drosophila or C. elegans, which is a roundworm, to live 30% longer if I just calorie starve them, And that's true. Actually, all the published data shows that, calorie restriction can extend lifespan. But look, I don't want that for you. I don't want to give you another 10 years where I say, look, sit on the couch and don't eat anything, and I'll give you another 10 years. That's not what we're trying to give folks. It's really about how do I give you another 10 years of living, but high vitality living, high performance living. So it's not about necessarily calorie restriction. It's how do we, based on all the data, optimize your performance, optimize your vitality, whether it's balance or flexibility or strength training, aerobic conditioning. And by the way, using that same data to make sure you don't die of something stupid and preventable on the way. Because if you're doing all those things and you've got an early stage high-grade tumor that you didn't know about, then none of that else matters, right? So we try and do both things. My elevator pitch for what we do as a company is how do we use data to A, make sure you don't die of something stupid and preventable, and B, optimize your performance? So that's really kind of where we're at.
Okay, so let's go to we've got 8 minutes left here, and then we're going to bring Larry up. But let's talk a little bit about the technology.
Yes.
And so you mentioned AI, and it's obviously something we're all thinking about. I just read a study a couple days ago that came out that it was a test on the accuracy of ChatGPT and other similar programs. And they have a 5% to 27% inaccuracy.
Right.
Like they're just wrong. And I've talked to a number of physicians about this. I'm actually working on a piece about, are doctors going to use this? That kind of, it's a search tool. I mean, we all know the promise of it, right? I mean, you're a physician. I should have said this. He's a physician. So I'm asking one here. But, I mean, I guess one of the notions is I like augmented intelligence, AI, augmented intelligence, because I want to keep my doctor. I want to keep you in that picture. I want you in that picture. I don't want a machine telling me that. But wouldn't it be nice to have a little thing in your ear just helping you, with some data so you don't have to look it up on a screen? How resistant or accepting are you and your colleagues right now to this still not entirely accurate new technology?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Our co-founder, Dr. Craig Venter, he's never met a doctor he didn't want to replace. And so as president of the company, I am a MD, PhD physician scientist by training. I kind of wear 3 hats in the company: physician, scientist, and business, all 3. But look, I think I welcome and embrace, and my training is in radiology. Look, the day when AI can make me and my team read faster and more accurately, that's the holy grail. I don't think radiologists will be completely replaced. I don't think internal medicine docs will be completely replaced, but AI will allow us to interpret, read, care more accurately and more efficiently faster. So right now it takes my team, that whole body MRI that we just showed of David's with the aneurysm, that took a good hour and a half to read. So my radiologist will read about 5 of those a day. That's a pretty full day for them. But look, with AI, I think we can do 50, maybe even 500 of those a day. So it's really AI overreading and reading, and then the radiologist doing sort of a final blessing. So I think that's where this is moving, not trying to replace doctors, but as you say, augment.
Although radiology's been one they all talk about, like that you actually may be more on the chopping block.
Well, but we've heard that for 20 years, and actually it's a growing field. So
no, that's true too. But and I don't know. It's always fuzzy to me what exactly is AI, but certainly advanced computing is a large part of what you guys are doing too, right? Algorithms that do work. I mean, that are accurate, but still a lot of hands-on, as you said. So, what about you probably at least talk about this and study it, but I would be remiss with 5 minutes left not to go into some of the more potential radical, new technologies that might dramatically increase lifespan or health span. Do you see any of those? I mean, there's gene editing, there's regenerative therapies. These are all in pretty early stages in most cases. Even bionics. I mean, Elon's Neuralink.
Right.
I mean, where do you stand?
Yeah. Well, so we're on the bleeding edge, not the lunatic edge, I think is what we like to say. And I think if you're doing healthcare services, look, our North Star, even though precision medicine data and testing is important, our North Star is and always will be patient care. But I think I'll say 2 things about that. One is that with the data, we find that the importance of cellular health is so critical, because at the end of the day, whether it's heart disease or diabetes or neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, at the end of the day, the root cause of that dysfunction is abnormal cellular health. Mitochondria, which are little energy factories in the cell, are dysfunctional. That's the case with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So no matter what your risk factors are, all of you in the room, based on your data, can benefit from a optimized and tailored plan for cellular health. Increasing mitochondrial efficiency, increasing insulin sensitivity, driving sugar. Everyone thinks that high sugar or sugar is a bad thing. Well, sugar is not a toxin. Actually, every single cell in our body needs sugar. The problem with high blood sugar is the sugar is in your blood. That's not where you want it. You want it actually in your cells, where with oxygen you're producing ATP and your neurons and your cells are doing what they need to do. So it's really, it's reducing inflammation. It's increasing mitochondrial support. It's increasing insulin sensitivity. And by the way, those are all proven ways to mitigate lower risk for all the neurodegenerative diseases. But to get to your question about, so that's sort of bleeding edge, but not lunatic edge. I think and we certainly are looking at regenerative medicine. I think there's no doubt there's a future for that. If you talk honestly to most orthopedic surgeons and they're honest, they will tell you in 10 years, they're not going to be doing, metal knee replacements. They're probably going to be injecting regenerative stem cells into the knee joint when you have 50% cartilage loss, not when you have bone-on-bone 100% cartilage loss. That's the whole concept behind precision prevention. We want to find when you're pre-symptomatic, when you're still at the point where we can do something about it. So, with regenerative stem cells in the knees, if you've got bone-on-bone cartilage loss, you're not regrowing the cartilage. If you have already serious dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, unfortunately right now we're not able to regrow gray matter neurons. But if we find that risk or disease early or pre-symptomatic, I think regenerative stem cells is going to be a huge area for that. But it's all about precision prevention, finding the earliest signs so that you can actually give these therapies when it still can make a difference. And by the way, we're big believers, and we have data on this, that it's not just about mitigating progression. Everyone talks about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, mitigating progression. That is true, but actually what is also true is that if you really catch it early enough, you can reverse, but not if it's too far gone.
Yeah, they already do that with knees. I mean, it's still somewhat experimental, but I know people that are working on that, and it's being quite successful. Yep. In fact, I got yelled at when I had a meniscus operation. My orthopedic surgeon is one of those guys working on it, and he said, why didn't you come to me? I would have given you some. Yeah, we would have regrown it. Right. Now you're missing part of your cartilage because somebody cut it out. Yeah.
So you're a poster child in many ways, David.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But anyway, so I wanted to ask, though, also just to cover the whole landscape here. Some of these technologies are already bumping up against enhancement. And if we're talking about the future, and it's a future we may want to see or may not want to see, that could apply to this question both ways. But are you having people asking you about this? How do you fall with, having technologies that not only can keep you healthier, in a fairly natural way, but driven by data and technology, to actually push into more of like a neural link, or we're actually, instead of having my phone here, it's actually in my head. Yeah.
Well, listen.
By the way, that's a horrible thought in my view, but anyway. Yeah.
I mentioned the first longevity hack is data, your own data. The second one is brain health, because I think we have a lot of, getting to your question, we have a lot of clients who come to see me. I meet with a lot of our patients, members, clients. And a lot of them are like, oh, geez, my mom and dad, age 60s, age 50, massive heart attack. I know my problem, doc. It's going to be in the heart. You don't need to tell me. And the reality is they really have no idea. And actually, if you look at their data, you look at their calcium score, it's normal, it's 0. Their cholesterol is fine. You look at their genetic risk, their polygenic risk score for coronary artery disease, it's totally fine. And you actually say, look, your heart is not going to be your problem. You're going to have a beating heart till the day you die. And actually, what we found is X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's cancer, maybe it's dementia, maybe it's Parkinson's, whatever it is. You got to let data really run its course. But I think to your question, we can, as you all know, we had our second pig heart transplant, and I think the gentleman who got it in Maryland lived about a month. I think that was 2 weeks shorter than the first candidate who got it. But the reality is we can do heart transplants. Now we're doing pig heart transplants. We can do kidney transplants. We can do pancreas transplants. We can do bowel transplants. But we can't yet do brain transplants. So, my whole pitch is, even before Neuralink, is it's what I call radical organ reprioritization, for our clients is, look, your number one priority has to be brain health. Everything else follows. You lose your nervous system, you lose your humanity, but you also lose the innervation to all your organs. So radical reprioritization of brain health, and we help our clients to do that, again, with everything from mitochondrial efficiency, insulin sensitivity, reducing inflammation, a number of other things. But look, I think that's all future stuff. Again, maybe a little bit lunatic edge right now. But I think there's a lot, my message is, there's a lot that you can do right now, way more than you probably even know. But a lot of it is, how do we use data to drive that decision support? And that's what we do with our data.
Well, appreciate that, David. And I would love, is Larry back there? Yes. Yeah, we want to. So we all know Larry. I've known Larry for many, many years. I've written about him. We have, worked on quantified self kind of projects together. I do have to mention though that I have a recent book out, as I said, and my co-author, by the way, is Craig Venter, which was a very interesting project working with Dr. Venter. But anyway, it's on the microbiome of the planet. So we know about the microbiome inside of us, and we probably know more about Larry's microbiome than any other human being's microbiome. But this is on the whole planet, and there is a climate change aspect of it. And most of the talks I've been giving have been around the impact of climate change on the microbiome of the planet, which of course affects us. But I'm just mentioning this because, introducing Larry, because he's in the book. And as always, I had a series of fascinating conversations with him, including one reason he left physics and got interested in biology was because there are more microbes on Earth than there are stars in the universe. At least that's the estimate. And Larry said the stars are really fascinating because he's an astrophysicist, but he said they don't have software. In other words, they don't have DNA. And so if you think about that universe of microbes, it became far more interesting to this man who was studying the universe. So, Larry, you're going to walk us through.
Give me and I'll help.
There you go. Larry.
So Larry had an interesting experience, as always, and going to walk us through how he's going to live longer.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I am a perfect poster child for what David was just talking about, because I was in HLI when David was 5 years ago when it was first formed. I have more data on myself than I can follow it, but I follow it over time. And I didn't expect to find anything wrong when I went in, rejoined in January of this year. But the reason I did is because, what do I know? I mean, I've got all this data, but I can't intuit the actual state, the cellular state of the inside of my body. This is a big problem because people think they can, but it's not. So what happened is I got the full body scan. It's MRI. I had my first full body scan back in 2008, but it was CAT scan, and I didn't like the radiation that went with that. So I was pleased to be able to do that. But what I hadn't expected is to find anything. And so we're going to give you an example. Here's one of my graphs. This is PSA, your prostate-specific antigen. And this is what men follow and doctors follow. And you see it went from sort of 1 over the last 15 years up to about 4, which for my age is at the beginning to be interesting, but I have 100 different things I follow like that, and I didn't think this was particularly worrisome. Well, here's the MRI image from HLI from this January, and David, I'll let you explain it, being a radiologist, but he starts off by saying, well, Larry, there's good news. We looked for cancer tumors in a dozen organs in your body, and 11 of them didn't have a tumor. And I said, aha, go on.
This is why radiologists generally don't talk to patients.
We great bedside manner there,
small
David.
dark rooms, but.
So David, David Karow, you want to tell them what you're looking at here?
So as I mentioned, one of the cornerstones for what we do, it's multimodal data, it's genomics, it's wearables, it's metabolomics, it's blood data, it's also imaging data. But as Larry pointed out, look, we 20 years ago used to do whole body CT. The amount of radiation, even today with whole body CT, is off the charts. And we know that any good screening modality, you have to do it regularly, right? You get a mammogram not once every 5 years or 10 years, you get a mammogram every year, every 2 years, right? So the key behind whole body MRI is that it's radiation free and it's non-invasive. There's no IV contrast. So it's literally a magnet, and you go in the magnet and you meditate for about an hour, and we come out with these fantastic images. So the purpose of the whole body MRI is to follow biomarkers, but it's also to screen for aneurysms and metabolic health and diabetes and liver fat and neurodegeneration and neurovascular, like with David's issue, but it's also cancer. Now, we're not saying that it can find every cancer, like we don't look at blood cancers or skin cancer with the whole body MR, but for about 85% of solid organ tumors, and all the ones that you probably are concerned about, pancreas, brain, head and neck, lung, kidney, transitional cell, the collecting system, prostate, breast, all of those we can pick up pretty reliably at very, very early stages. We're talking like the 1 centimeter stage or smaller with whole body MR. And that's the case here. So for Larry, we had the benefit of 5 years ago. He went through this exact same scan, totally normal prostate. And this time around, we saw that small lesion there in the left peripheral zone of the prostate, literally the size of a dime. It hadn't yet gone beyond the prostate, and that's the radiologists were not very tricky. We just call it the red arrow sign there. That's where the tumor is. And I was very confident, and so I did tell Larry, we don't try and be gray about this. Larry, I do think this is going to be a cancer. It's probably 95% likely to be a cancer. But the great news, other than not having 11 out of the 12 other cancers, was that this is very early. It hasn't gone beyond the capsule. Because we do a whole body MRI, we can do 3 things with this imaging. We can say, listen, Larry, there is a small tumor there, but it hasn't gone beyond the capsule, so we can sort of stage it. There's no metastatic disease. And we can also say, look, based on this, we do think it's going to be higher grade. So this is probably something we're going to have to deal with, right? So we can do 3 things with the whole body MR. Stage it, say whether there's cancer, and then also grade it. So that was the finding.
Well, and the great thing is that David has been a radiologist at UC San Diego, where I was a professor for 23 years, retired in July of 2020. He worked very closely with the urology. How many of these scans, of men's scans, have you looked at of the prostate?
Probably over 10,000. Yeah, you were 10,001.
I love a high-end number in a doctor.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing to find about any doctor that is about to do something to you, is how many have you done? And so, because that means that they really have seen it all, and they can really context what you are. So he said, I'm pretty sure about this, but let me get to my colleagues in UC San Diego in urology, and let's do a classic prostate biopsy. And I won't get too clinical with you, except there are 16 needles that sort of this device that comes up the other end of the GI tract from this mouth, and they shoot these hollow needles into your prostate. But they use this MRI to guide where they think the tumor is, so that they're making sure that they get ones there. And this is this beautiful machine from Philips called UroNav that they can do for this, and they can actually get a 3D version of where the needles went in your prostate, so they can actually then not only extract segments of your prostate, then take that to the pathology lab and look at it microscopically, but they can see where in the prostate this tumor was and confirm that there isn't cancer, because the MRI is great at imaging if the tumor is big enough that you can actually see it, and that means millimeters probably. And so what came back from those 16, and 4 on this target, is that it was cancer. They looked on the microscope, so we actually sent it off for Johns Hopkins, which does most of the nation's second opinion on these things, and sure enough, it was coming back as an intermediate grade, and I won't get into the Gleason score, but it's a way that they score these things. But it's an intermediate grade cancer. But the cool thing is that there's now a company where you can then take and send off those samples from the cancer, and they will then look at the gene expression, not just the DNA that's altered in what used to be one of your human prostate cells is now cancerous, is still human, but cancerous. But what is it actually expressing? What is the RNA? So they look at the transcriptomics, and they can then figure out how aggressive is this particular cancer. And you can't tell by looking at it. And so this is in this report that comes back, and amazingly, I had a high-risk cancer, meaning that even if they go in and take out my prostate or do radiation therapy, in 15 years, I still have a 26% chance of dying from this. So that indicated maybe we need to do something about this. And David was very helpful to me as a physician, because he said, look, Larry, you have time to systematically work on this. This is not going to kill you tomorrow, even though it's high risk. You've got, what?
I think all the data would actually show with the early stage and grade that we caught your tumor, it would not make a material bit of difference in terms of outcome, whether you waited 3 weeks, 6 months, even a year. And that is sort of the tincture and blessing of time that gave us the opportunity to work together to get you the best treatment possible.
Right. And that was in March when I had of this year. And so then in May, he said, well, let's make sure that there isn't that the cancer hasn't moved anywhere, not just around in the prostate, but anywhere else in the body. And so you do a full body CT with a positron. They take fluorine-18, which is radioactive positron emitter, add it to what is called prostate-specific membrane antigen, and then they inject that into you, and then that fluoresces wherever there is that kind of prostate cancer throughout your body. Because once you metastasize, then your risk of death is pretty high in a relatively short time. So this is my tumor. It's so cool. I love it. I mean, it's just, isn't that beautiful? I mean, and that's, very localized. In fact, it was actually, I have a fairly large prostate, about a triple what a 75-year-old male like myself should have. And so that's why I get up several times at night. That's, for those of you who have that situation, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so, but this thing is, like you said, is a centimeter. It sounds sort of big. Well, that's 0.5% of the volume of a 110 cc prostate. That's very localized. And so for me, logically, it said, okay, what then is the current state of medicine to do something about this? And so I met with my UCSD urologist, but also with David and the team in HLI. And David, you're the doctor, not me. I'm a patient. Why don't you say what you told me my options were?
Yeah. Well, listen, I told Larry what I'll share with you guys, which is even today in 2023, prostate cancer treatment is insane. And not in a good way. Because, if you think about it, most cancers, liver cancer, kidney cancer, if you have liver cancer, you don't take out the whole liver. If you have kidney cancer, you do a partial nephrectomy. Partial, you take part of it out, not the whole kidney generally. Lung, we don't take out the entire lung generally with a small lung tumor. But prostate still in 2023, with the exception of the treatment that Larry got, it's whole gland treatment, which is insane. Right? Why, for a tumor that's 1/100th of the prostate, should a man have to have the entire prostate removed, which is called radical prostatectomy, or the whole prostate blasted with radiation, which is radiation therapy, plus androgen deprivation, where you lose all your testosterone for nine months, and it's horrible. So I said, Larry, look, the advantage, I always say, precision diagnostics means nothing unless it's married to precision therapeutics or interventions.
Right.
And that is really the key to precision medicine. You want to use the data to drive decision support. This is something that's super interesting. There's a real advantage to finding a tumor as small as we did with Larry's, not only in terms of morbidity and mortality, right? So it's true, you will have a much better 5, 10, 20-year survival than somebody with a tumor twice your size. But you know what the other big difference is? and it's the same in prostate or lung. The difference between a 1 and 2 centimeter lung cancer is not just 5-year survival, it's also that if I find a 1 centimeter lung cancer, I can remove one of your segments of the lung. You have 15 segments of your lung, right? So you lose one, you got 14 left. Your lung capacity is still pretty good. On the other hand, you have a 2 centimeter lung tumor. Now I got to remove an entire lobe of your lung. We only got 4 lobes. So now when you're walking upstairs, you're going to feel that. You're not running your 5 miles like you used to after you lost one of your lobes of your lung. So the advantage of early detection, it's not just 5-year survival, it's also morbidity and performance and vitality. And that's the whole concept of precision prevention. Not just, hey, what is your 5-year survival? But let's get Larry back to work, back to the CSE department at UCSD, back to his family way faster than if he had to have a radical prostatectomy. So I said, look, Larry, I trained at UCLA, Ronald Reagan Medical Center, beautiful place, top 5 hospital. Steve Raim is an interventional radiologist there. He's a clinical mentor of mine. I want you to see him because he's doing this new innovative technique, and it's it's called TULSA, and it's basically transurethral ultrasound. It uses sound wave energy to literally heat and ablate the tumor. And guess what? It's not whole gland. It's what we call focal therapy, like it should be. Not medieval, treating the whole gland, but welcome to the year 2023, actually focal therapy. So that is what I recommended, and I think, Larry, you're going to talk about that experience.
Yeah, and actually, I've worked with all aspects of UCSD, and they're very, very good in their UCSD health. But the urologist that would be doing focal therapy was doing a different kind of ultrasound. And one of the problems is I do have some calcification within the prostate. And calcification can act as both a shield and a reflector of ultrasound. And so he said, from my point of view, this is not something that we would want to do. We will have to either do androgen deprivation therapy for 9 months followed by radiation or surgical removal. But he said, I'd be happy to send you to a place like UCLA where Dr. Steve Raim has pioneered this method of transurethral. I don't want to get into too clinical, but since half of you don't have a prostate to start with, the women, and the men probably like me hadn't really thought much about it. But the bladder has a little tube that comes down and out that goes right through the center of the prostate, as you can see here. And so if you can send a thin device, which is what we call in NS, National Science Foundation, a cyber-physical device, then it has like 10 actuators that are ultrasound generators. And if you have taken the MRI and the PET scan as input, you create, and this is what Dr. Steve Raim did, create a 3-dimensional target within the prostate that you want to ablate. You want to destroy those cells, including the cancer cells, but also around it, so you're not, to minimize the chance of spreading. Those are under software control, that they're actually timed to intersect to make the temperature very hot. It's like sort of microwaving yourself. And then hot enough that you're actually going to kill those cells. And then you do that over a few minutes as it goes around and fill out that volume. And so here I am. This is exactly 1 month ago on Tuesday. In fact, my second opportunity to have this operation was today. And I told him I had prior engagement here. And so they said, okay, maybe we'll get a cancellation, which they did. And I was fortunate enough to get in a month ago because I didn't want to miss fire. So once I'm in there, then you have this team. And this is, again, I think, someone who spent their life building collaborative teams. You have this cutting edge interventional radiologist, Steve Raim, and a very, very good urologist, Wayne Brisbane, and they are together. You can see Wayne there in the picture as I'm going into the tube. Now, the thing that I have wanted for at least 25 years, since Chris Johnson, who is a fire person that does computer graphics, has been here many times. first showed me an example where they were using real-time MRI during surgery. This idea that you can see inside yourself in real time as you're doing the surgery, I always wanted that. But I wanted to make sure it was a robot that was doing the surgery to help the human do the surgery, but I wanted the real time. And so I'm going to show you now, and this is from Dr. Raymond, who, in spite of doing these things on Tuesday, these procedures, he's doing those now, this moment. But he's going to take the time to drive an hour down here to be here this afternoon for the 4 to 5 breakout to talk to you more about this. He's had a clinical trial in this for now 3 years. He's one of the pioneers in developing this. What this is the MRI, does slices. So this is the slice from the bottom to the top of my prostate, those 12 slices. And then you see the black line. Well, this sort of squished sphere that is shaped because of the results from the MRI that goes into kind of a little AI program that creates where we ought to ablate. This is the intersection, that black line in each of those slices through this. And these are coming out every 5 seconds. So I'm in the MRI with the tube up my urethra, and they're watching this screen. They're watching at all these 12 levels simultaneously the temperature that's in the prostate caused by the ultrasound. And here is the movie. This is every frame is every 5 seconds, and so it's, of course, speeded up. And you'll see this like a Doppler radar, right? If you see that, you've got to get down in the shelter. Anyway, the red, you'll see it over there is a temperature scale. That's 86 degrees centigrade or 190 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're effectively coming close to boiling inside of me, but they're sweeping around by changing the phasing of those ultrasound generators. So they're intersecting and causing the most heating exactly where they want it, and then they're moving it around to gradually ablate the volume with all inside the prostate. Because the things outside your prostate, like it's a sort of a grand central station, of neurovascular bundles and stuff that deal with everything from your sex to your sexual capabilities to your urination, incontinence or not. You don't want to mess with those things, which of course do get ripped out if you have surgery. But this is all inside. And I am so totally fascinated by this movie. I was under anesthesia for 5 or 6 hours, right? I didn't get to see the movie in real time. But thankfully, Steve had it on a memory stick, and so afterwards he just, gave it to me, and I took it up here and I said, "Boy, I'll like to use that at fire."
Larry, it looks like a weather report.
Yeah, it does. It does, and that's inside me in real time as they're doing the procedure. This is the future. It's not just early detection. It's exactly what Dr. Karow said. It's the fact that you can take early detection to enable early therapy that then knocks it out. And here's the before and after. I made sure to go into HLI. I said, "David, look, this is science. Let's get an image of me. Let me get back in the tube, a few days before this thing, and then let's do it again afterwards. And then I can show at fire, the before and after." And radiologists.
Yep. So the pre-treatment shows that small, dime-size tumor and a couple different pulse sequences there. That the one on the top there, post-treatment, it looks kind of gory and gruesome, doesn't it? But it's actually got a 2-for-1. So Larry, as he pointed out, normal-sized prostate would be about 30 cc's. His was like 3 times that size, 100 cc's. So Steve, Dr. Raymond, not only ablated with heat and ultrasound the tumor, but kind of the part of the prostate that grows or hypertrophies with benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is what you had in addition to the tumor,
right,
is in the transitional zone or center of the prostate. So Steve said, "Okay, well, we're going to do 2-for-1 here." He ablated some of that, central transitional zone tissue, so that hopefully, as this thing calms down, in a couple of months, where you won't have to wake up in the middle of the night and urinate, which is a common problem with BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy. So really with this treatment, he was able to do two things. One, successfully ablate the tumor. It's totally gone. There's no evidence of it. And I'm confident you'll never have. I told Larry, you got to worry about other things, not this. This is going to be something that we just did. You took care of.
My brain. He wants me to worry about my brain.
Yeah, right. And then also the BPH. I think we're going to show that we're able to get that volume down. So very, very successful procedure.
Well, and I'm so thankful to HLI because I would never have known about this. It would be years before any of the normal medical practices would have found out that I had this. And by that time, it would have been much more difficult to deal with, and the side effects to me personally of those things would have been much worse.
Let me just comment on that. That's an important point. Again, I think if this tumor was twice the size, you probably would still have the same 5-year survival. It would be pretty damn good. But you wouldn't be able to get TULSA, right? So TULSA is reserved, again, marrying precision diagnostics with precision therapeutics, and that's what we did here. But the tumor is 2 or 3 times that size. Now you got to have the radical prostatectomy. Now you got to have the whole gland radiotherapy. So this is precisely because we found it early. And by the way, with prostate cancer, we talk about the trifecta, right? Which is a cure. Everyone wants that. And no impotence or no incontinence. And with the problem with whole gland therapy is you often get one of those 3 or 2 of those 3. You might get the cure, but you're also impotent and incontinent. And so with TULSA, all the data so far shows that you get the trifecta. And we think that's the case with Larry too.
So we have a couple minutes left, and I did want to kind of circle back and tie this to our earlier discussion and where we are. And I wanted to underscore too that we talk about things like genetics and polyomics and all of these things, but there's also so much happening in the realm of operations and the creativity of, like Dr. Raymond, which I want to meet him later.
Yeah,
he's
an amazing doctor.
Knowing a little bit about those technologies, that's linking together, a series of technologies and procedures and knowledge, and making it work in a way that is so much less invasive. But anyway, this I think we wanted to bring this up here because this is illustrating where we are. I mean, it had genetics, it had scanning technologies, it had advanced diagnostics. I'm sure there was a computer in there somewhere. Definitely generating that really cool movie, which, Larry, I want to get a copy of. But all those technologies were put together so that Larry can be here with us a long time.
And look, it's a month ago. Yesterday I did all my free weights again. I was 30, I've been doing 5 miles a day I had to have a catheter in for the first 2 weeks, but that didn't stop me from doing at least the last 4 or 5 days of that 2 weeks, doing 4 or 5 miles a day. And I can't tell that there's anything different and just what.
Let me just bring it home. Larry, you are a personal example of how we get our GDP spending on healthcare from 20% to 5%.
Right.
How we both improve outcomes while controlling costs. Because Larry, we didn't have to do a radical surgery with you. You were out in 5 hours, right? We didn't have to do 9 months of androgen deprivation.
Right.
We didn't have to do 9 months of radiation therapy. We didn't have to do metastatic disease treatment, which is costly and a horrible cost of living and all of that. So this is an example of how precision prevention. If our healthcare system had a backbone of precision prevention, not sick care, we would not only improve outcomes, you're going to have a great outcome, but also how we actually control costs as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean, we're out of time here, but I did want to get into some of the costs, and even the insurance was fairly attractive, how it paid.
But here's the cool thing. Lee Hood, who I have the honor of having worked as he was one of my great mentors in this area, is going to talk to you at noon, and he's going to say, yeah, Larry, that was great. That's what you call in 2023 early detection. Now, let me tell you where we're going. That by looking at much more detailed metabolites and proteomics, we're going to be able to tell you years before you even get it at this stage. So this is not an end story. This is this earlier and earlier and earlier detection until finally, there's sort of an IU. There's this sort of a computational model of yourself. And when you begin to see things heading south in these very integrated systems that Lee has been the father of system biology, he'll talk to you about at noon, then you start intervening and you don't get chronically ill. You don't create 2/3 or 3/4 of the medical cost. And this is, and I'll just say one last thing about fire, this will resonate with you, because if you go back to 2008, when Mark Anderson asked us to put together a bunch of wildfire prevention people, what was the outcome of that CTO challenge? It was, if you can detect it early and kill it, it doesn't become something like Lahaina or the 2007 mega fires in San Diego. Does that sound familiar to what we just had? It's the same thing. Yeah. The difference is that the technology, bioengineering, advanced imaging is on an exponential, and normal standard of care medicine is linear.
And there's definitely more to come. And I wish we had more time, because this is obviously a fascinating subject. And there is a whole business side to it, which we didn't get to. I know some of you may even be involved in, that's becoming more mature now in terms of businesses that can actually work on this technology. Anyway, we got to get off the stage, but thank you guys so much.